What I'm calling Dretski's beautiful theory, he would never call it that, me, is a theory about how to operationalize perceptual awareness. See, the problem we have is this. It looks like, in most cases, we might be trying to infer perceptual awareness, or its lack, from reports that subjects give us. But we've seen good reasons to reject that as a useful operationalization, although it's still widely used. What could we do instead? One suggestion that's sometimes considered is appeal to what's called objective criteria. The idea is that we can eliminate subjective reports altogether. According to objective criteria, unaware perception occurs when a subject's performance in a forced choice task is at chance. In other words, if you can show that there's any discrimination at all, you've got evidence for perceptual awareness. Now, with your lecture buddy, take 90 seconds. Do you think this is a good way to go? Or is there some problem that you can see here? Is this a good way to operationalize perceptual awareness? 90 seconds, go. So I can't ask you right now what you think. Sorry about that. But I do want to mention an objection to this idea from Timmermans and Cleeremans, which I think it comes from one of the most thoughtful theoretical papers on the topic. It's very advanced, so I'm not necessarily encouraging you to read it, but if you're curious, it's an excellent read. They say, above chance performance on a forced choice task involving the masked stimulus, we don't need to worry about what that is, need not necessarily be due to conscious knowledge. Here's the problem. Unless you've already decided that there can't be perception without awareness, you must think that perceptual discrimination can happen without perceptual awareness. So you must reject the objective criteria. Objective criteria are only useful to you if you're already convinced that there can't be perception without awareness. In that case, of course you can take any kind of perceptual discrimination as evidence for awareness. Now, so here I'm not in a way recommending any particular view to you. I'm just suggesting that objective criteria provides a useless operationalization as long as we keep open the question, could there be perception without perceptual awareness? But I think we can go a little bit further here, because if you imagine the B that I introduced you to right at the beginning of this section on awareness, the B surely is able to perceptually discriminate. I think that we don't actually know yet whether the B has perceptual awareness. That for us should be an open question. That being the case, we shouldn't accept this criterion. So someone who accepts this criterion has to say, not only is there no possibility of perception without perceptual awareness, but also that in the matter of the bee, it's not just that the bee is perceptually aware, it's that you and I, humans, we already know that the bee is perceptually aware if we're alert to the evidence that's currently available to us. Swallow it if you can, right? I can't, so I'm going to say no objective criteria for me. And now you might think, well, there's nowhere to go here. We tried to operationalize perceptual awareness in terms of verbal reports. We ran into some problems. We tried to do it in terms of objective criteria. We ran into complementary problems. Timmermans and Cleeremans say, basically, we're not there. The challenge of measuring awareness based on behavioural measures, despite substantial progress achieved over the years, remains essentially in. But I don't think that these cognitive scientists have been paying a lot of attention to Dretski, because I think, this is the beautiful part, Dretski has actually met the challenge. Let me explain. Dretski makes the following proposal about awareness in the reading that I've set as the seminar task. He says, he calls this RTA, I'm not sure why, that's a silly name for a view, isn't it? Anyway, his proposal is this. If we're thinking operationally, S is being aware of X amounts to S perceiving X and information about X being available to S as a reason, providing some justification, for doing what she wants or chooses or decides to do. Brilliant. What a beautiful proposal. Why am I so excited about this proposal? I think this provides us with a brilliant operationalization that avoids the pitfalls both of the objective criteria and the quite different pitfalls associated with taking verbal reports at face value. But I don't think that's obvious. I think what we've got to do is work through some cases with Dretski's proposal. With that in mind, I want to take you back to the blind sight case. So Dretski's right here. What we should be doing is not inferring lack of awareness from subjects' reports. We shouldn't do that. What we should be doing instead is inferring lack of awareness from information not being available to the subject as a reason for action. So if we think blind-sighted subjects do have the ability to perceptually distinguish things, we've got good reason to think that they're perceiving. If we also think that the information that provides the basis for their perceptual discrimination is not information that's available to them as a reason for action, then we can conclude that we've got a case of perception without awareness. So let me talk you through how that might go. So you remember, here's a blind sight experiment. A light is shined somewhere in your visual field, and you have to point to the light. Let's say you have to point to the light. Can you point to the light for me? Great, well done. Very good. Now, oh, too far. So what's happening here? Here's what I think is happening in your brain. You enjoy perceptual awareness of the light. As I might say, you're conscious of it. You form an intention to point to the light because I've asked you to do that. And you're obviously being, what's the word for this? Compliant. Well done. And now your brain acquires information about where the light is. And I've run out of space. And it moves your arm towards the light. Now, that, of course, that's very rough and ready, but I think that's roughly how things unfold in you. What happens? Now, of course, that's very rough and ready, but I think that's how things unfold in you. What happens in the case of the blind-sighted subject? Good question, Steve. Let's take a look. Let's go backwards, actually. So I think at this point, things in you, things in the blind-sighted subject, they're pretty much the same. There's not much interesting difference to be had there. In both cases, there's a brain that's moving an arm towards a light. What about this stage? Likewise, both cases, the brain is acquiring information about the location of the light. So there's some kind of task that's going on that's swinging all of the attentional mechanisms into play that cause enhanced processing and all the rest of it that allow us to set parameters for action. Great, same in both cases. What about at this point? And this is subtle. I think most people actually miss this. It looks like the same thing is happening, but you can see that the two things are remarkably different. You at the top, blindsided subject at the bottom. If you imagine that the equipment goes wrong, and actually there are two lights which are shown and not one. Here's what happens. The experimenter intends this top light to appear and intends that you point at the top light. That's the experimenter's criterion of success. But there's a kind of malfunction and another light goes on simultaneously. So now there are two lights, not one. Now, in your case, let's suppose that you form the intention, just ignore the fact there are two. You form the intention to point at this light, the lower light, which the experimenter didn't intend to come on at all. What you do is, in a sense, correct. It's not what the experimenter wanted. So the experimenter doesn't mark you as correct. But your action is correct and rational, given the intention that you form. You succeed relative to a standard that you yourself set. Your perception of the light, this light, together with your intention to point at that perceived light, provides you with good reason for doing what you're doing. Acting on that reason, you succeed. The standard of success, then, is a consequence of your own perceptual awareness of the light. But what happens in the case of the blindsided subject? Well, the blindsided subject is completely unaware of the lights, so of course is completely unaware that there are two lights anyway. So let's suppose that the blindsided subject does what the experimenter asks. She points at what she guesses will be the location of the light. She's got no idea. And she happens to point to the wrong location. Now, from her point of view, that's neither right nor wrong. The only thing we have in this case is the experimenter's criterion of success. And by that criterion of success, she fails. So here's the key thing. Here's the key thing. Your perceptual awareness makes a difference comparing you with a blindsided subject because it sets a standard for success, a reason against which your actions can judge, which is your own reason, not the reason imposed on you by the experimenter. That's the difference that blindsight makes. This is Dretski's thought. Sorry, that's the difference that perceptual awareness makes, the thing that blindsight robs you of, deprives you of. And that's essentially Dretski's beautiful idea, my sort of elaboration of it. Dretski's beautiful theory says we infer perception from this, we infer lack of awareness from that, and when we compare those two things together, we see firstly that blindsight provides us with evidence for perception without awareness, and secondly, we understand something about the functions of perceptual awareness. It's all coming together now. That's fantastic. But you know, I'm going to give you 90 seconds here. And the reason is this. It's very important that you understand what Dretski's operational criteria for perception are and what Dretski's operational criteria for perceptual awareness are. So what I want to do now is just to give you a chance in 90 seconds with your lecture buddies to check how much you've got of that already. It's very important that you understand both the operational criteria to get this. So just take 90 seconds and you fill in the blanks in the next 90 seconds, perhaps with the help of your buddies or, if necessary, going back through some notes. 90 seconds, go. So this is one of those rare times in philosophy when there's a right answer. You rarely get that outside the logic course that you'll be doing at some point. Dretski's operational criterion for perception says this. Operationally, you've got perception when you've got information about the thing being in the subject, which is available for the subject's control and guidance of action. And thirdly, that information is extracted from stimulation by accredited receptor systems. When you've got those three things, you can infer that there's perception in the subject. Dretski's operationalization of perception. We discussed that about 3 sections ago in the unit called A Test for Perception. It's also, of course, in Dretski's paper. It's so beautifully written, I really recommend that. And indeed, you should read that for the seminar. What about lack of awareness? Dretski's suggestion is this. When the information isn't available to you as a reason for action, then that's something that you're not aware of. You lack perceptual awareness of the thing. So when you're carrying information about something in such a way as to perceive it, if that information isn't available to you as a reason, you're not perceptually aware of the thing. Very simple, beautiful theory. I think this is absolutely ideal because it allows us to understand how there could be perception without awareness, and it provides us with a view about the functions of perceptual awareness. So if you remember right back to the beginning of this discussion on perceptual awareness, I offered you the thought that we need to ask the question, what are the functions of perceptual awareness? And we postponed that question in order to ask the question, could there be perception without awareness? And then I said to you, once we've answered that question, perhaps we're going to learn something about the functions of perceptual awareness. And now I think it's not a matter of deduction, of course, but I think that we can extract an answer from this operationalization. The answer is very simple. Perceptual awareness's function is to allow you to act for reasons. Perceptual awareness matters in the life of a human, in part at least, because it allows the human to set the standard for success and not just some external criterion, as the case of the lights was supposed to illustrate. So what we've done here is rejected the idea that I started off by criticizing, the idea that perceptual awareness enables you to act. You can see very clearly that we're rejecting that because we regard information's availability for control and guidance of action as part of the operationalization of perception, with or without awareness. So we must be rejecting that idea. What we're suggesting instead is that perceptual awareness enables you to act for reasons. And you can see that falls out from this idea that the operationalization of lack of awareness is the inability of the subject to make use of the perceptual information as a reason for action. So the whole thing fits together beautifully. It's not a matter of logic. There isn't a very compelling argument here. I think the best case I can make for accepting this idea is that, as Timmermans and Cleeremans said, there isn't really any alternative that we currently have. And this seems to be quite well motivated theoretically. But before we celebrate too much, there's a problem. Of course there's a problem. Steve, what's the problem? You probably already know what the problem is, some of you. Oh gosh, here's the problem. Very simple. If we look at Dretski's suggestion about how perceptual awareness should be operationalized, that conforms pretty well to what's happening experimentally. That matches the scientific research pretty much. Not perfectly, but I would say we're mostly there. We're mostly there. Good. When we go to how perceptual awareness is actually operationalized, we don't actually have an attempt to understand, does the subject have reasons for action? We're not really applying Dretski's proposal about operationalization. The Weizkrantz et al. Study, for example, and many of the others, rely on the subject's reports as reports. They're not trying to contrast a case where the subject does have reasons for action with a case where the subject doesn't. Oh, sorry, I've gone too far. They're not trying to contrast a case where the subject does have reasons for actions with a case where the subject doesn't have reasons for actions. So the problem is this: Dretski provides us with a marvellous theory, seems to be quite nicely motivated, it's coherent, gives us a sensible view about the functions of perceptual awareness, everything we could want, but it doesn't really fit nicely with what the scientific evidence that we've been reviewing is doing. And that disconnect allows us to be much less confident in the conclusion that perceptual awareness has the function of enabling you to act for reasons than we would otherwise be. Because Dretski's pitch to us was, we can extract a view about the function of perceptual awareness from the scientific practice. I think that's a great pitch. The problem is that Dretski hasn't 100% delivered on that. Or has he? Maybe you think he has. I think that there's a problem here.